and welcome to the new CPS Energy headquarters at 500 McCullough Avenue. We're very happy to be here. It's an exciting day for us. I am joined right now by Paula Gold-Williams, our President and CEO. Thank you for joining us. Before I get too far in, I would like to make sure everybody knows that the local government relations team is situated here. Melissa Cox, not spilling her coffee, Nancy Tavares, Julia Carrillo-Haynes, and then Velma Corona is probably still escorting guests in. My name is John Leal, and I'm the Director of Local Government Relations. I've been here at CPS for about 17 years, started about a month or two before Paula, and about 22 years as a member of the utility business in a couple of different places, in a couple of different cities. So today we're here to have a conversation, and a candid conversation about what resiliency is. Earlier this year, we were impacted by a storm that no one could have predicted. It lasted longer and was harsher than anything we've seen before in our community. And if you look up the definition of resiliency, it's the capacity to rebound quickly. And in an event that we hit a magnitude of Storm Uri again, that could be very difficult. And so we're here to talk about how cities deliver the most core services necessary: fire and police, probably dispatch, water and sewer facilities, and of course us as a utility, electric and gas utility for our community. A couple of housekeeping things before we get too far. For those of us in the room, we are joined by WebEx. We have a number of internal and external guests that are on our WebEx room today. I'll pause for a moment and turn it to Adrian Garcia, who is our WebEx moderator for our WebEx protocols today.
Great, thanks so much, John. As John mentioned, my name is Adrian Garcia, Digital Communications Specialist here at CPS Energy. Just a little bit of housekeeping rules for WebEx, and for those who are not really familiar with WebEx, we really want to ensure that the audio from today's summit is clear and cut as well. So what we are asking is if you can please have your mics muted, just so this can ensure the mic coming through the WebEx is clear and there's no other background noises happening. And also, to help with any bandwidth issues, we're also asking if you can please shut down your video. This will help the video also become clear as well. The easiest way to have the video that's being displayed on your screen is to go to your top right-hand corner. There should be a little box that says Layout. And if you click Layout, you have three options. You have the grid view, a stack view, and a side-by-side view. The easiest way to also ensure that the video that's being displayed is in full screen is there is a title that says Show Participants Without Video. Now, if you unclick this, this will have the video that's being displayed in full screen mode. So just as John mentioned, I will be monitoring the WebEx, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box in the WebEx session. And this will also be the area where you will want to make sure to have your questions. So if you have a question for Mr. John and Ms. Paula, please use the chat box in the WebEx, and then we will also be monitoring those comments. So that way we will make sure John is aware that you have a question or a comment to make sure to address in the summit. And with that, I'd like to turn over to John. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Adrian. A couple of more housekeeping rules, if you haven't seen them already as you made your way in. Men's and women's restrooms are just behind me. There is a stairway here that'll take you right outside this door to them. And then beverages, we have coffee and water just on the other side of this wall. Please feel free to grab as you wish. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Fred Bonnywell. Fred's going to lead us through our safety message. He is virtual today. Fred is our Chief Security, Safety, and Gas Solutions Officer. And so, Fred, safety message, please.
Thank you, John, and thanks to all of you for being an integral part of our system operations as Suburban City Partners. We appreciate that very much. You know, as we approach the Memorial Day holiday that's upcoming, we're going to be challenged as people to spend time with our families and our friends, but realize still we're in the middle of a pandemic too. Even though the mask rules have been released and reaffirmed last week from the governor, we are now into a personal choice mode our employees in transitioning through this pandemic, which we've done an excellent job doing. So just, pay attention to what's around you, exercise good hygiene habits, and still pay attention to proper distancing from folks. I think those are really solid rules to still follow. And also, as an extension of the olive branch to you, we are here to serve safety and security functions, and should anything come up with you as our partners, please let me know. I'd be happy to help you and assist you as best that I can with matters. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Fred. Also for safety, if in the event alarms do go off in this building, please follow one of our CPS employees. We have a rally point across the street in the parking lot. There are exits behind you and behind myself. So thank you. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Paula Gold-Williams, our President and CEO, for opening remarks.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, I think this is the first biggest meeting we've had in this room with guests. And we are excited to get back to the new normal. We are absolutely appreciative of the relationship that we've had with you over the years, and to be here today to talk about what's next, what are we learning, and what we can do is a great honor for us to start with you. I think a couple of things to share. We have 6 pillars, value pillars that we developed, and I think you've seen them over and over again, but I want to talk about them because it kind of ties into where we are today. And we've been surveying your constituents, our customers, for several years about what's valuable to you. What do you want us to focus on? What are your priorities? And check me, CPS Energy team, but the 6 value pillars are customer affordability, reliability, safety, security, environmental responsibility, and resilience. And no matter whether we're talking about STEP and energy efficiency and conservation, or the Flex Power Bundle, or just generally CPS Energy and the things and the programs we do, when we survey, typically, I mean, it's not illogical, you'll come in and you'll see the results have flipped between affordability and reliability. I think customer affordability is something that customers always care about. No matter what income bracket you have, nobody wants an increase. And of course, we are talking about budgets, and I was talking to our dentist this morning, talking about budgets, and when you do that, that makes the focus. Interestingly, I would say 80% of the time, what's the last ranked value that you think people think is valuable? Anybody? It's always resilience.
I was going to answer.
It's always resilience. Matter of fact, sometimes when we got the answer back, somebody says, "I don't care about that. You do that. That's your responsibility. I don't even know what it is, and I don't care. That sounds like a CPS Energy thing." And luckily, through our discussions with management and through our discussions with our board, we thought resilience was really important. And as John said, it's an aspect of reliability. And a lot of times people would say, what's the difference? And if you have a reliable system, what do you care about resilience? It's one and the same. But it isn't. The ability to recover. Really, really important. If I could snap my fingers and take back Uri and be in the same fight about environmental responsibility and, what's most important, technology and all those kind of things, I would, because the reliability crisis that caused so much pain and anguish for our constituents, our customers, your constituents, we would have never wanted that to happen. And now we're in the middle of a financial tsunami and insult to injury from that perspective. But we do have a philosophy here of thinking that every time we get lemons, we make lemonade. And the awareness now that resiliency does matter, and that we have to think harder about our energy solutions. the soft parts. How can we better communicate? How can we better share? How can we better alert? How can we better figure out how are we going to even make our homes more resilient? Thanks for the great conversation this morning about, wood and logs and batteries and candles and, all those things in the world, filling up bathtubs with water. All of those things that were necessary and people found out were a must, but by the time you were in the middle of a crisis and whether you had power cut off to your home, and again, we apologize for that, it was almost impossible to go get things. So resiliency is an aspect of being more proactive. We at CPS Energy, I personally believe that we have to make a lot of changes again in our communication. We need to relook at, and you'll hear from Paul Barham later, how do we create, and this is going to be a big deal, a re-architecture of our systems so that we can better pinpoint the critical parts of everybody's community, but also be able to move large outages the way it was intended so they weren't so long and went on endlessly. And then we're still fighting for San Antonio, for all of your communities, for everyone who lives here. We're fighting for Texas. And we've got to be there to talk at the state level about huge systemic issues that happen through ERCOT and the natural gas delivery system. And we are talking to elected officials, we're talking to regulators, we are trying to negotiate with all the parties involved on behalf of San Antonio, and we're using litigation as we need to. And that fight, all of those fights that we're having, I mean, I've never seen the level of suits. We're suing quite a few people, and people are suing us. But the reason why we're doing that is because we have to fix the system. San Antonio can do a lot of things right, and we could do all the things that we can do as a partnership, but we're connected to a state grid. Any outage on the grid in any part of Texas can have a ripple effect to San Antonio and any other place in Texas. It's a shared asset. And so we want to fix the systemic issues of how it works, how the state communicates to us, how they choose to price power, how they choose to react to a declared disaster, and all of those things that in the middle of a crisis should never happen and be better managed. So we are at multi-levels trying to work through these challenges. And we always say we're a 24/7, 365 business. More so today than ever. There is no time off. There's no rest for the weary. But these are the things that we have to do because we can't, we also feel like this event, we can't have the same reaction again to a crisis. Now, John and I had a conversation this morning and we were like, was this event in February a 100-year event or a 1,000-year event? Or could it happen next year? I don't know. I mean, if I was the person who could tell you that it would not happen again for 100 more years, I think I would be doing some other things like, betting on games and things like that. I don't know that to be true. But resilience is about planning for the unthinkable and making sure that you're in front of it because you just never know when you're going to have those issues. And we had a weather event, but again, because it's a connected grid, there could be other events that happen. And I'm going to talk about something that's scary for everybody, particularly when you're running cities, right? When you start to think about bad actors like cyber criminals. Cyber criminals, I think, believe that infrastructure of all types are fun places to be. I think they think it's all like a Rubik's Cube. And they understand when they can disrupt cities and they can disrupt infrastructure, they can do a lot of damage. Sometimes it's for the fun of it. Most of the time it's for the fun of it and then I'll extract some money. And all of those things can happen. there just could be worn infrastructure somewhere on the grid that affects a transmission line. The important part of the grid is that it's important to keep the energy flowing, the power flowing throughout it on a regular basis. And once there's disruption with the frequency, and for any particular reason at a fairly short period of time, there has to be a lot of effort to correct that situation. So I applaud you being with us today. I think Yuri is our battle cry to try to be your best partner in looking at a lot of energy solutions, and I look forward to talking about real solutions with you. But I also want to tell you that I think the reason why we're passionate about this because we have to think many different things could happen. Oftentimes, the responses are the same regardless of the crisis, and we just have to be more ready for your constituents and more ready for our customers for any crisis that may occur. And we're passionate about that. I'll wrap it up with thank you so much again for your feedback. I mean, it was fair and it was honest and it was passionate on the behalf of the people that you represent and serve. And it was the things that we needed to know. And we still continue to be interested in your thoughts and your ideas. And so we want to work with you. And we think it's super exciting that our suburban cities want to talk about your particular communities and how, again, we can partner. And we are looking at trying to create additional partnerships. We think public-private partnerships are things that can help us. There are entities out there that we have a relationship with that want to come in and help solve some problems. I think we have some resources, but I think trying to bring in folks who can find other resources to help us are really important. We do have potentially, and I'm glad Fred is on the phone, and then we have Shanna Ramirez that's also over our security aspects of what we do. We're trying to talk to the military. Of course, they want to do certain things for their bases, but in general, they want San Antonio to be more secure. The ability for them to be more self-sufficient and be able to microgrid certain activities on their bases means we can take power from that situation and push it back out again to your communities. And I also want to let you know that SAEDF, San Antonio Economic Development Foundation, is really thinking about its whole way that it interacts and is thinking regionally, not just about San Antonio proper, but all of the communities, and then reaching out beyond our metropolitan area to think about a regional solution. And that group of organizations, large employers and small, are trying to think about what we can do as a community to recast San Antonio's view on resiliency. Not just what CPS Energy does, but what our commitments are. And so I have been very proud to share with our board this meeting that we have today and how we can potentially network and connect what you're doing with what we need to do, with what some other businesses want to do, with what the military can do. That's kind of our view about just about anything. When we can partner and find the needs that every organization has, and we can leverage those dollars and prioritize those dollars. And even more important, how do you take specific solutions and make them real? I hate talking about strategic things and all you do is talk about them. I just hate it. I just hate that. So several years ago, we created the concept of action-enabled strategies. And we went around here and we say, here's my AES, right? But I think what we're talking about today is a great way for us to take the things that we need to do strategically, collaboratively, and start to look for projects that work for you and your communities. And the ability to see things work means also the ability ultimately to be able to take those to scale and cascade them through our community. So a lot of heavy stuff, but again, it's you're going to inspire us because we can't do it alone. And we're going to keep talking to you about what we can do, and we want to bring some other things to our board and council, knowing that you want to partner with us. So thank you so much today. We're excited about it. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to go somewhere and sit in a chair, maybe float around a little bit and talk to you all. But I am just super excited to have you here today. John, did I miss anything?
You're right on point, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Paula, again for your words and your opening remarks. We're going to take a moment to transition. We're not going to lose WebEx here for a second, but we're going to bring up Paul Barham. I'm going to switch a few things out on the table here. While Paul joins us, thank you, Julia.
I just noticed that y'all match.
We called this morning.
Yeah, we live down the street from each other too, so it makes more sense too. We match. Yeah, we'll have to work on that, Paul. So thank you so much. Here's a water for you.
Thank you,
Make
sir.
sure, not that you're on the hot seat by any means. I described this to Paul as the only way I could describe it was I would facilitate it like Evan Smith, but nicer. But hopefully I'll hold my own.
Good, because I'll talk to Lori if you're mean to me.
Thank you. That's my wife. Overall, Paul, you've been with us for more than a cup of coffee. You've been here in a number of positions at CPS Energy. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell us a little about that because it's going to define what your role is today.
Yeah, so this summer I'll have been here at CPS 35 years, so I'm finding myself increasingly the old man in the crowd. But I have been in a number of operational areas. I started out in our power plants and plant engineer, construction of Spruce 1, so that goes, kind of dates me, and plant manager of, several different plants, and did a lot of things out there, moved to our market operations area when the Texas ERCOT market was a very new thing, and was involved in a lot of the development of that. Very interesting how that's all developed, and it's really pretty amazing the changes that have occurred in the landscape for the grid in Texas and how that operates. And then I guess for the past 7 years I've been in the wire side of the business. And so Doyle Beneby, our previous CEO, called me one day and says, "Hey, I got an opportunity for you." And as Paula has told me, there's only one answer for the CEO. So I was probably when I started here, I never would have dreamed of being on the wire side of the business, but it's really been a great opportunity. It's amazing a lot of the changes and technology that are going on in the distribution side of the business.
And so that's what we're here to talk about today. So your current title is Chief Grid Optimization and Resiliency Officer. What more could you have asked for before that title, besides Storm Uri in February? But Paula mentioned this, and I'll recap it. The threat or the event doesn't have to be weather. It could be terrorism. It could be both cyber and security. And so you've got a multitude of business units that report to you, also inclusive of our Energy Management Center, which is the core to our grid optimization group. And they manage, circuit-wise, how many circuits?
We have about 600 distribution circuits and I think around 1,500 miles of transmission lines that we own and operate. And
so not to go long into the point, but we were prepared February 13th for what we knew the standard was. And going into the 14th, 15th, and the rest of the week, we experienced across with the entire state. Now think about it. By 7 a.m. February 15th, San Antonio was at 9 degrees. Most of the state was below 10 degrees, if not freezing. So what were we seeing in the wee hours of the morning?
Well, so in the wee hours of morning coming into the event, of course, we are getting notifications from ERCOT as we're kind of, there's various stages you go through that as you work up, and load shed is kind of that final stage where, essentially last stop.
So it's conservation.
Yeah.
It's deployment of demand resource management.
Yes.
It's those that can curtail will. It's 3 energy alert levels, with the third one being we are here now.
That's right.
And in a matter of 35 minutes, we went through
Yeah, so through the kind of the emergency alert stages, went from kind of notification stage to EEA level 3 in, I think it was an hour or something like that. So, and this has to do with, ERCOT is looking at, so basic equation, you got X amount of load and you got to have enough generation to cover this load. Those they have to be equal plus some little margin that allows them to cover the variability. And so that's what ERCOT, everything kind of boils down to that. And when they see that operating space getting smaller and smaller, they start triggering these alert levels and stepping that up as they see that margin getting to a place where they have concerns that they will be able to keep the grid up without kind of that next stage of action, which, as John pointed out, in the early stages is a lot of demand response, is kind of notification to customers, hey, conserve, and probably in our summer times you will have seen some of those. We'll send out notifications that are typically initiated by ERCOT of, hey, conservation day, it's going to be pretty tight on load. But in this case, because of the nature of what created the shortage, which was super high loads and loss of generation across the state at huge levels of all types, created this very rapid degradation of the state of the grid.
So in 2011, ERCOT asked generators and transmission distribution companies to shed load. For CPS Energy in our community, what did that look like in 11 compared to 2021?
So in 2011, I was kind of over in Frank's area, or one of his areas. I was in market operations at the time, and that's a whole nother story of watching large sums of money move around. In that case, we ended up coming out better, but we got the notification from ERCOT and kind of went through those stages, demand response, and but then got into shedding of load, and that was the first time in some number of years that we'd experienced that. And so we were working to keep our plants on like we did in this situation, but ERCOT called for 4,000 megawatts. And so probably when I talk about load shed, I'm going to talk about the total number ERCOT called for. And then, ERCOT will put out a call for, in that case, 4,000 megawatts. All the TDSPs, transmission and distribution service providers, which we are one of those, basically we know what our share of that is. For CPS, that's around 7%. Give or take. And so we shed our portion of that, as does all the other TDSPs. And so in that case, it was ERCOT put out the order for 4,000, and stepped into that, and we met those demands. And but it was for, I think, basically through the night, about 7.5 hours. And so into the next morning, we were out of the load shed. There was still some pricing things going on over the next, couple of days because of, continued high loads, but we had gotten out of the emergency conditions in just overnight.
Here comes 2021, Storm Uri, 4,000 versus in load shed.
Yeah, so, so ERCOT will make basically a call. Their head operator he's got a phone, it picks up and basically calls all the TDSPs. And, he gives, orders, notifications on what's going on. And I know I'm not necessarily on those calls. That's, our director who's over the system operator. But at that time, they started asking for, 1, 2, 3,000 1,000 megawatts and moving up, and we pretty quickly got to that 4,000 megawatt level, which we'd been there before, and probably everybody was comfortable, as was CPS. No problem managing that level. Would not have seen anything like what we saw. But through the night, that continued to increase until we got to 20,000 megawatts. And I can tell you that TDSPs across the state were all, this was completely unimagined territory for everyone.
So 5 times more
Yes.
in about an hour and a half. It's dynamic, it's happening. The state is cold, it's snowing. So let's take it from a weather perspective down to a circuit. We lost a number of circuits. We took them down on purpose. Circuits have grown organically over time. Describe how we look at them February 13th and how we look at them today, so that our partners here understand the changes that we've made and how we're looking at doing things in the future.
Yeah, so I think y'all have heard, conversations around how we've got circuits that are, exempted because of critical customers. SAWS is obviously one of those, as are, parts of the bases and others. We had carved out and identified some number of circuits for these critical loads. There's also another group of the circuits that are associated with this automatic system that will automatically dump circuits if the frequency gets too low, like Paula talked about. And what's left over is what we have available to us to manage this load shed. And so, as we've described, we quickly got to a point where the impact on customers was just bad, for lack of better term. Where we're looking at right now, so short-term solution with the existing infrastructure is relooking at what's critical, and to create more capacity, essentially we have to reduce the amount that we are reserving for critical customers, right? That's a painful place to be right now. It's giving tough answers to a lot of our customers at the moment. That being said, we are also making some changes to our procedures where the load shed will be a staged event. So there's customers that may be in the first group, second group, and we'll build up so that we're not hitting all the customers. And so we're trying to put, we'll say, the more critical loads kind of last in line, and we'll only get to those, if the grid conditions require that. We're also, so we also made some changes to our automatic program that manages that. I think, as y'all have heard, that program did fine with 4,000 megawatt load shed, but it was essentially locked up when we got to the levels that we did. So we've already addressed that issue. And so kind of short term, that's what we have right now. We do have a plan in place that will get us to a 20,000 megawatt load shed event. We know how we would make that happen, which is, so if we were to see that this summer, which we don't expect that, but if we did, we do have a plan that gets us there. Longer term,
Okay.
technology solutions that we're pursuing.
So essentially, circuit configuration will get us part of the way, and then not just our own actions, but understanding what the state is going to do with regard to critical load determination. And for our partners, and speaking frankly, if you were part of a community that sustained electricity, if you had electricity during this event, it is likely that those buildings and those areas of our community, if we got to a point of Storm Uri, that we'll have to rotate those customers now, because the critical load category has shrunk, which includes municipal buildings, fire stations, police stations. And so one of the things that we're talking about today is in our next series, we'll get more tactical about how do you right-size the system? What do you need to do in order to be prepared for the unthinkable event? And that's what resiliency boils down to. So speaking from our perspective, Paul, what is a critical circuit now? Level 1 trauma, hopefully water pumps to an extent.
Yeah. So water
Airport.
pumps, so we're working with, I know our customer engagement team, Rudy and Karma has been, looking at loads y'all have. We're working with, other critical customers, SAW being a good example. So, if y'all, any of y'all caught SAW's presentation from Black and Beach to the Emergency Preparedness Committee, they have 60, 70 sites. Obviously, those, we would not be able to make every one of those a critical circuit, or we'd have, maybe no circuits left. So we are actively working with SAWS. Myself and Frank and Rudy have been meeting with Steve Klaus and his team to really, get down to some of the results from the Black and Beach study on, in this type of event, what is really critical, what do you have to have essentially to keep the water system up at just a minimum operating level. And so that's the kind of thing we're looking at. What are those only critical circuits on the bases? Level 1 trauma centers.
Okay. Airport.
Airport is on a redundant feed, and so they right now the circuits they were on might shed, but the automated scheme they would have would swap them between those circuits if we shed both of those circuits.
What does it mean for our partners today? Our team in local government relations has the addresses to your water facilities, your facilities that are most critical. That means Paul's team has that information, and we know where to find them, and we were tracking them during Storm Uri. To Paul's point, even the nature and the dynamic of the storm, we couldn't keep the grid up both locally and across the region and the state by making any changes at that moment. So we understand your infrastructure was impacted. So how do we look forward to if more customers are going to be brought into the fold in an extreme event like Uri, how do we get prepared for that? And that's really part of the discussion. Again, going back to that resiliency standpoint. We are working with our customers. We will be meeting as a team with the City of San Antonio's Emergency Preparedness Committee meeting on Friday. That is televised on TVSA. We will be talking about a number of things that we're looking at, both in circuit configuration, and we're also watching what the state's doing. There is still more to be learned about what the state is doing, but from a perspective, there will be a statewide emergency alert system. There will be more communication from ERCOT on outages and how dynamic it is and more preparedness. Weatherization standards, and we can talk a little bit about that from Paul's infrastructure that needs to be weatherized, and in Frank as well from a fleet perspective, power plant fleet, on what weatherization standards. And then the oversight of load and critical load, and then of course sharing information with customers, which in a fast-paced, middle-of-the-night type of situation can be difficult, but we're going to figure out a way to do it better and be as informative as we can. So in light of that, and as we close this portion of the discussion, again, we encourage both questions off of chat on the WebEx and in person, and there are two microphones here for that. But Paul, from a weatherization perspective on your infrastructure, T&D, distribution, transmission, substations, how's that looking as we go forward?
So, the weatherization is, a lot different than what Frank will talk about in terms of the plants, where, he's dealing with water and things that freeze. We don't have that. So our weatherization tends to be in the summer. We have seasonal preparation, procedures, and actually we're going through our summer prep right now, and it's a process where, I have my leadership, they're all signing off on things that say that, yeah, we've completed these items and we're ready to go. And that, as you would expect for the summer, has to do with high temperatures, high loads associated with air conditioning, and, we look at what that load flow is going to be like in the system, and make sure there's no risk areas. But in the winter, we also have seasonal preparedness. So, but our winter design impacts tend to be around wind. Now, if there's a lot of ice loading can be an issue. We have not really experienced that. That doesn't mean we might not in the future, but our design standards account for that. And we have been looking at our wind design criteria to make sure that that's appropriate for kind of some of the severe events that we're seeing.
Thank you. Again, we have a moment for questions. Do we have a question coming in from chat?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Actually, Scott, if you have a question, I'll let you go first. I was just going to think of something that I've heard from our suburban cities, but please, Scott.
I just had something that was not really a question, it's more of an observation. And our February the 14th, so my Valentine's Day started with Melissa. And she did a tremendous job. She called us out of the blue, wanting to kind of know what the addresses are for our critical infrastructure. And you mentioned water, but we have a lift station that kind of helps IKEA through what has to leave IKEA. And if we would not have had that lift station up and running the entire time, we would have had a lot of critical stuff happen along with our water. So, and I think another suburban city also called and said, how did you get Melissa to do that? And they also called her. So she did a tremendous job kind of talking us through ensuring that the places that are critical to us, we have a hospital as well. I know she did a good job keeping them kind of up and running, and our facilities at City Hall were the same way. So I'd like to thank her personally. I don't know where she's at. I hope I embarrass her. But she did a wonderful job.
She's just
for
off
us.
screen.
All right, perfect. But thank you. That's no questions.
Thank you, sir.
So my question that we've heard, John and I have heard from the team. So John alluded to it a little bit earlier about the changing of what is designated as critical infrastructure. Can you speak a little bit, Paul, to our partners here about the feasibility or how realistic it is for, say, their municipal buildings to be on or to be considered critical, and how can they add those to the critical list or not? What does that look like going forward? A lot of them house their 911 systems in their municipal offices. So, what can we do to help them through that? And again, is that even feasible going forward?
So there are limits on that, right? So I think this is a process where we're getting requests from all over the city, and all these requests are for functions and things that are absolutely important to our community. But keeping in mind that this is a case where we're responding to a requirement from the state grid operator. And we really don't have a choice whether we follow through with that or not. And even if we didn't, I would probably be we would be in bigger trouble if we were having to answer questions of why CPS did not fulfill our obligation as a TDSP in the system and meet our load shed obligation. Whether it's a double-edged sword, but we are part of this team, and you can't decide that when the game's getting tough that you don't want to be on the team anymore, right? The team is there to keep us all together through these types of events. And it is the design of electric infrastructure around the world, there's nothing unusual about ERCOT, the Eastern Interconnect, the Western Interconnect, or any interconnect. It is this team sharing of this, this responsibility, to keep the system up, working together, so as part of that, we have to look at, how can we realistically make the obligations that we have to ERCOT? And so as we're looking at these requests, essentially we're having to balance what is really required in this type of situation, for emergency operations for our community, essentially.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the comment, Scott. We'll now transition to Frank Almarez. And while we do that, I'll ask that Kim get set up with the third speaker using Paul's mic. And so as Frank comes up, Frank is the Chief Power Sustainability and Business Development Officer. That's a lot. You've got economic development and our energy market supply operation, our fleet of power plants. Start with our power plants. We've got X amount of capacity, and how do we enter the situation into Storm Uri, and how do we respond through that?
Well, as Paul mentioned, there's a seasonal preparation that happens in advance of every season, and we undertook that in advance of this winter like we do every other season. I'm going to digress just for a second to help answer the question, but we were at 85% available from a power generation fleet standpoint during this weather event. And the 15% that didn't perform was for a variety of reasons. Some were mechanical issues that happened, they just failed, they'd been complicated machines. Some of it was fuel pressure problems. Some of it was electrical issues that happen from time to time. And then some of it was weatherization, things that you would categorize as weatherization. So of that 15% that was not available during the storm, a little bit less than 10% was related to weatherization. And that's in part because there is a group out there called it's ASHRAE, and it's long and complicated, so I'll try and remember, but it's American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and I think you get the gist of it. It's engineers that focus on this topic. And so Paul's laughing, he probably knows this like the back of his hand, but they have standards that they produce for different regions of the country. South Texas would be different than the northern parts of the United States, the northern states. We have exceeded those standards in our construction of our plants because we serve a community. We're owned by the city of San Antonio. We serve all of you in this community, and not to be negative about things, but we kind of look at the plants that we've built and operated and weatherized and all those things in a different light than others in the state. We have better reliability as a result of that focus and work that we have put into it over the years. Well, the standard for our area is some number, but we have weatherized our plants to be able to withstand 0 degrees for 0 degrees. One of the issues is that the standards have not spoken to the duration of the freeze. If you hold something below its freezing point, for a long, long time, there's a point at which it will freeze regardless of what you did to weatherize it. So what that speaks to is our requirement to go back and look, and when I say we, I mean, all generators, and not just in the state of Texas, but everybody that owns a power generation plant. The industry, that's right. In order to decide, well, what standards are we going to apply here? The one that we had before, we exceeded it, and it still wasn't, it didn't completely stop all weather issues from happening to us. So getting back to your question specifically, we went through all of those checks and in advance. This is months prior to the event. Well, in the days leading up to it, you start to see the weather forecast dip. It looks like it's going to get below freezing in a couple successive days. But up until the very last, it looked like every day it would come above freezing, and all of the, the freeze that started to happen during the overnight hours would, rectify itself during the daylight hours when it came up, when the temperatures went above freezing once again. So we did all of the things that you would expect. We made sure that we had adequate fuel supply. We've said this, and Paula has done a great job of saying this, that every technology ran into its difficulties. Coal, it's something that I think that there's a segment of the community would like to be out of our operation of coal. It had snow on the coal piles, but there were 60 days of coal sitting on those piles, and they were able to produce, on-site fuel. Solar performed well, during the day. It was not producing in the morning and evenings when it's dark at those peak times. Gas had the obvious pressurization problems that we've spoken about. But we look at those, make sure that we have adequate fuel supply and that their staffing is appropriate. And there was a moment during the event when we, and it was kind of right as we saw things getting, that it was going to be serious, that we made available our sequestration facilities that we had stood up for the pandemic. I mean, this was for COVID that we got this ready just in case the COVID pandemic got a lot worse and we were struggling to find staffing to keep people that had that specialized knowledge to operate those plants and to operate the system operations. As I said at the outset, that customers' needs are unique, and we want to be able to offer not just that one thing, but maybe that's on-site generation, but also some storage. Maybe it's a microgrid full islanding capability that has some other, meets the need of a particular customer in that unique way. So we're going to likely run an RFP that will not pick a technological winner, which is something CPS Energy doesn't like to do. We like to take all comers. So we want to try and define what those different business needs are and see who can give us, the best technological solution, the best partnership, the best investment in our community. And I don't mean that dollars necessarily, but in all ways, the way that they're going to connect and be a part of our community.
But necessity drives innovation.
Right.
And that's what we're looking for private industry to help us out with, help our cities out with.
Right, that's exactly right. And when that happens, then it ideally reduces the number of dollars that CPS Energy has to put at risk in our customers' dollars. It reduces the amount of dollars that our customers have to put up for some of these technologies and allows private industry to make those investments, take some of that capital risk, but nonetheless bring technological advancements to our community.
Do we have any questions on chat? How about from our community? Mayor Trevino, Castle Hills.
Good morning. Quick question. Has there been any consideration working with some of the partners that have backup generation to do schedule outages to subsidize the grid?
So backup generation, when they have scheduled outage on those units?
So for example, if this building has a backup generation capability, that y'all would turn it on scheduled, even if the power wasn't off, to produce more and to have a reserve to some extent?
I see, yeah. I've just been talking with our facilities team about, what is possible even within our own, portfolio of real estate and backup and emergency generation. I think that's fantastic. I think to the extent that's possible, we would like to see it. Now, just speaking for CPS Energy, because I imagine that others are going to have similar issues, we didn't build them that way to be able to do that, to put power back to the grid when the grid power is still running. So, some people will have to make investments. We would have to make some kind of investment to do that, but it sure would be a nice capability to have in the event that, you have some generation that's available and, the grid needs it. We have a demand response program that I'm sure you're aware of, where people can curtail their load Of course, that's the other way to do it is one, you can create new generation, or you can reduce your consumption. We ourselves cut our load a lot during the winter storm, and others can too, and some of them, participate in a program that gets them a check, during the season or after the summer season because of the dollars they saved us for participating. But I think that in the future, we would be interested in participating in programs that allowed people to put power, and this is something that Paul was talking about as well. I don't know if it was this morning, but before, is that this conservation network, where I think all of us know what to do if it gets kind of hot outside, and you get to where the grid's getting kind of tight, you set your thermostat a little higher, 78, 80 degrees for time. In the winter, just the reverse, you set it down a little bit. But not very many knew what to do when it was super cold outside. It was 9 degrees. Setting your thermostat back to 70 degrees or 68 degrees is not really doing what's necessary. So there's these extreme actions that have, that's just a different, category of event. And what we'd like to do is educate folks and coordinate and partner with our customers to think through what you do in those kinds of extreme situations, including what you just described.
Frank, thank you. We have one more speaker, and I appreciate your participation with us today. I would certainly invite Kim Turner, not a stranger to anyone here in this room. Kim has been the longtime city manager and employee in Universal City. We have worked together to answer this very question for her city. Tell us, and we thought it was important. This is not just about us talking, certainly not about me talking, but it's about what our other community partners have done. And Kim, you were successful in installing large backup generation for your water system. Tell us a little bit about that, what you did. And that was back when Roland Hinojosa was here, and I remember that project. It was very extensive.
Yes, who happens to live in our city.
He lives, so it was a little bit for his own. I talked to him after the storm. He said, we never lost water. Well, very good. But tell me what you did, and I'll talk about how we coordinated that.
Well, we started on our generation project in 2010. Every year we put $240,000 in our utility budget for the purchase and installation of generators. So we've been doing that since 2010. Of course, here we are in 2021, and so we have a considerable amount of generator power within the city. Not only did we do it at all of our well plants, but we also did it at a lot of key public buildings that we have in the city. So I work at City Hall in the admin. Of course, the generator kicked on there. I could go into work every day. I had utility folks in there answering the phone. Municipal court was there answering the phone. And then we also have at our public works facility, which is separate from City Hall, they operated off generator power as well as our police and fire.
So we're not talking about something that you go to your box convenience, your box store, and pull a 3,500 watt system off. Talk to me about the size and the magnitude.
No, they're obviously very large, and we operate them once a week. Most of the staff at all of our buildings are used to the once a week blip that occurs when the generators go on. They are loud. Sorry for all of the neighbors that live around our buildings, but they're used to it. They can close their windows, and it just keeps us running. But no, when you're talking about the cost of a generator like the one to run City Hall, you're not talking, $50,000. You're talking $500,000 or more between the engineering and the installation and the transformer that you need to keep everything going. So it's an expensive prospect, but it's well worth it.
Fuel, that's something that you
Yes.
think about. That's something that we think about too. We talked earlier about how we can operate our plants off of coal, natural gas, fuel oil if necessary. What fuel did you choose for your
So we
facilities?
have diesel. And so with the recent snowstorm, what we did is obviously we capped off every one of the generators right away. We have a fuel company that delivers diesel to us regularly. But we also took some items that we have at Public Work and not only thought about the diesel to run the generators, we had to run them a little longer, but we also got fuel to make sure that we could keep our police and fire and Public Works operating during the entire time. One of the lessons that we've learned is, one, besides that you can't have enough alternative power and generators, is that, you have to have the fuel to run them and to keep everybody operating. So we are in the process of purchasing some trailers where we can have gas and diesel filled up. We worked with a couple of gas stations in town when they lost power, right? The gas lines, it was quite funny because there's one across from City Hall. You see all these people getting gas, they wait for a long time, they get to the pump and then they realize they're not there. Well, we had actually pumped some of their gas anyway, so they didn't have gas even if the power was on. So we were able to get a lot of things coordinated by working with that, and then we prepared for it, really. We knew we were going to need diesel, everything got topped off.
Let me give an example of what we did as a partner to UC. These generators are the size of a large pickup truck, if you will. Yes,
F-150 or something, yeah.
At least. And so we de-energized an entire neighborhood probably in 2018 and dropped those lines for safety reasons. De-energized, dropped the lines so that the crane and the clearance was adequate so we could get and help UC get this system installed, and then we worked and coordinated with the community to get them back online and set back up. That takes effort. So you were planning that job for years. And so you said, so at least 8, that went to was that your main water supply?
Yeah, so we have our own water system, and so we have lots of elevated tanks as well as other water well sites that we have to keep operating and filled at all times. And I think at this point we are pretty close to having all of our well plants and everything with a generator installation. And next step is to add the lift stations, because when people drink they have to use the toilet and then they got to flush and it's got to get out, and we have lift stations that need to keep operating. We'll also be adding generators to our other city facilities, animal shelter, golf course, which is very important, and the library, because it's not only about keeping water and sewer running, but for us, one of the lessons that we learned is that we didn't have somewhere to send people. There was lots of conversations that, this high school is a warming center. Well, they're not in our city, and we were very uncomfortable telling people to go there because we were putting them out on roads that they shouldn't have been on in the first place. So we will probably in the future have a generator at our library, which we will use as a warming, or most likely as a cooling center. And then our golf course, because with COVID and with the snowstorm, and we also got hit with a potential cyber security breach, that took us down for about 48 hours. And then we had a straight line wind, so 2020 was an exciting year for us. What? So a lot of our emergency planning paid off in that regard. But, like with CPS and everybody else, we have all this staff sequestered. We have to feed them and keep them happy because, we can't deal with angry people because their stomachs aren't full. So our golf course during COVID was able to operate and provide food 24/7 for all of the city employees that were working and were sequestered, or that were there even just for an 8-hour shift. When the snowstorm hit, of course the power was out at the golf course, but we were able to take all of the food and the staff from the golf course and we put them in other places where there were generators. And they basically cooked meals for everybody from there.
Did you, and I know the mayor's here too, is that a general fund decision to set that money aside? Or
well, we did it through our utility fund for the well sites and the public works building, and of course general fund for our emergency operations. So moving forward, yeah, it's a utility fund, it's not a general fund.
And so a portion of that is we have 31 franchise agreements with all our cities. Universal City is one of the few that takes advantage of the 1%.
Yes.
And so we have the ability as the operator of the franchise agreement to add a 1% city fee. And that city fee can cover the financial note, float the note for a generator, or provide, as it is in other communities, for infrastructure, wastewater pipe replacement, generators, renovations, wherever it might be. So we do want to make sure our cities know that there is additional funding that's available to their community as a partner of ours. So always, talk to us, talk to Julia, Nancy, Melissa about how to take advantage of that.
And we did take advantage of that when we put in our additional 1% on the CPS franchise fee. The one thing that the council did agree on was that those funds are set aside for capital improvement projects only. We don't use those for day-to-day operations. And so while we haven't necessarily used them for part of our generator project, because we're using them now for all the capital improvements in our parks, we do have that ability. The other thing that we've been looking at, which is a future funding source, which is the American Rescue Plan Act. It has provisions in there that are different for local municipalities than it is for counties and tribal units. And for those of you who haven't read the whole thing, it's very boring. But if you go to page 60 and you read the first full paragraph in there, it's like the key clause to the whole ARPA Act. And it talks about how the funds can be used by local governments to secure critical infrastructure for cybersecurity issues, not just the 4 general categories that they talk about. It also indicates that we can use them for roadways and for police and fire services. And so while they have the 4 categories on page 7 that really don't have a lot of application to Universal City per se, we're really looking more to what's on page 60 and to use some of those funds to get the rest of the generators in that would typically come from the general and the utility fund, and to get those put in sooner rather than later so that we have the reliable power when we need it.
So that's, staff mentioned that you would talk to them about that. We were actually looking to one of our trade associations to help give us a little bit of guidance on that, and talked about that just last week in order to find out where specifically can some of those monies be spent. Obviously, it's a benefit to the community. It's not a localized tax. It is stimulus money. It is Recovery Act money,
Yes.
Rescue Act money.
Yeah, it's Recovery Act money, but we don't just recover from one snowstorm. We don't just recover from COVID. We recover from emergencies of all kinds, all year long, sometimes every day, which can be a little bit exhausting. But when you have everything that's in place to keep your community running, it's a very satisfying feeling.
Excellent. I'm going to look at the team. Any questions from chat or here in the room? Again, this is one of your fellow colleagues that has taken the effort to prepare for resiliency, and I'm sure as we go through our next more tactical conversation, we'll have more conversation about what you did, what worked, the lessons learned throughout that. I'll pause there for just a moment. We have only a moment left to go. Kim, stay with us while I wrap this up. We are planning a second, more tactical session, as I mentioned, another hour and a half. What should you expect from that? Well, right-sizing your system. What is an identification of the most key infrastructure? Is it the whole building? Or is it 1 or 2 certain rooms where operations are critical? Fire, police, dispatch, your water system, your break room. I mean, if you're going to be there for 72 hours, there better be a couple coffee pots plugged into some type of critical infrastructure. And I say it jokingly, but it's the truth. You have to decide where your system needs to be. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And if there is a desire by our group here to partner together, we want to utilize some of our own resources, our supply chain and purchasing. Can we help with some language for an RFP? How will you submit it? And who are the technical experts out there that can help you in your individual buildings, your communities, get to the final solution? So we ask that you walk this journey with us. It may not be for everybody, but we are available to help with our consultation with our partners across the business community, technology, and of course, your friends here, the local government relations team, and of course, Paula and team as well. I thank you. We've recorded this session. We will put it on the web on our partner engagement page. And we certainly look forward to our June 8th event. That'll be from 10 to 11:30. From 11 to 12:30.
11 to 12:30.
Thank you, and have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.